Money can buy a 7-course meal, a private jet, and a tailored suit, but it cannot buy class, and it certainly can't buy intelligence. Julian Thorne, the ruthless CEO of Thorne Dynamics, walked into New York's most exclusive restaurant, thinking he was the smartest man in the room. He thought the quiet waitress pouring his wine was nothing more than furniture, a peasant beneath his notice. He and his girlfriend mocked her in French, laughing at her poverty, thinking their secrets were safe in a foreign tongue. They were wrong. They didn't know who she really was, or that their insults were about to cost them everything. The rain in Manhattan that Tuesday night was relentless. It wasn't the romantic, soft drizzle you see in movies. It was a cold, biting sheet of water that turned the gutters of Fifth Avenue into rushing rivers of grey sludge. Inside l'Orangerie, however, the weather did not exist. The restaurant, tucked away behind an unassuming black door with gold inlay, was a sanctuary of warm amber light, smelling faintly of saffron, truffle oil, and old money. Aurora Vance adjusted the collar of her starch-stiff uniform in the reflection of a brass coat rack. She looked tired. There were faint, violet circles under her eyes that even the expensive concealer she'd splurged on couldn't quite hide. To the patrons of l'Orangerie, she was nobody. She was a pair of hands that placed plates, a silhouette that refilled water glasses, a ghost that moved silently across the plush velvet carpet. "Table 4, Aurora," the maître d', Henri, snapped, his voice a low hiss. Henri was a short man with a moustache so precisely waxed it looked like it could cut glass. He ruled the floor with an iron fist. "The VIPs are arriving. Julian Thorne, do not mess this up. He sent back the soup last time because the temperature was off by 2 degrees. Aurora nodded, her face a mask of professional neutrality. "Understood, Henri." "And fix your apron," he muttered, turning on his heel to greet the guests. Aurora smoothed the white fabric over her waist. If Henri knew the truth, he wouldn't be speaking to her like that. If any of them knew that Aurora Vance held a dual degree in international relations and linguistics from the Sorbonne in Paris, or that just 3 years ago she was an analyst for a boutique firm in London, the dynamic would shift. But tragedy has a way of erasing a person's history. After her father's sudden bankruptcy and subsequent heart attack, the medical bills had swallowed everything. The family estate, the savings, the future, gone. Now she was Aurora the waitress, sending every spare dollar back to a care facility in Ohio for her mother. The heavy oak doors swung open. The air in the restaurant seemed to shift, the oxygen sucked out by the sheer ego of the man who walked in. Julian Thorne was undeniably handsome in a predatory, shark-like way. He was 34, the CEO of Thorne Dynamics, a tech conglomerate currently under investigation by the SEC for aggressive acquisition tactics, though the charges never seemed to stick. He wore a bespoke Brioni suit that cost more than Aurora made in a year. On his wrist sat a Patek Philippe Nautilus, the dial glinting under the crystal chandeliers. Hanging on his arm was Bianca St. Clair. She was a vision of manufactured perfection. An aspiring model and socialite, Bianca was known less for her career and more for the string of high-profile men she dated. She wore a slip dress of emerald silk that left very little to the imagination, and her laughter, as they entered, was loud and performative. "God, it's ghastly out there," Bianca complained, shaking a few droplets of water from her hair, though she had barely been exposed to the elements between the limousine and the door. "It's New York, darling. Grime is part of the charm," Julian drawled. His voice was deep, smooth, and reeked of arrogance. He didn't look at the staff as he walked to table 4, the best seat in the house, secluded in a semi-private alcove near the fireplace. Aurora took a breath. She grabbed the heavy leather-bound menus and the wine list. She had served billionaires before. She had served celebrities. The key was to be efficient, invisible, and deaf. You heard nothing, you saw nothing. She approached the table just as they were settling in. "Good evening. Welcome to l'Orangerie," Aurora said, her voice steady and polite. "My name is Aurora, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Julian didn't look up. He was busy typing on his phone. He waved a hand dismissively in her direction. "Sparkling water, San Pellegrino, and bring the sommelier. I don't want to waste time with the house pours." Bianca looked Aurora up and down, her eyes narrowing. There was an instinctive cruelty in Bianca, a defense mechanism where she had to establish dominance over any other female in her vicinity immediately. "And try to find a glass that doesn't have smudges on it this time," Bianca said, offering a tight, fake smile. "Last time we were here, the glassware was filthy." "I apologize for that previous experience, madam," Aurora said, forcing the customer service warmth into her tone. "I will personally inspect the glasses myself." "Madame," Bianca laughed, turning to Julian. "God, she makes me feel old. Do I look like a madame to you, Julian?" Julian finally looked up, sliding his phone into his jacket pocket. He glanced at Aurora for a fraction of a second, his eyes cold and uninterested, before turning his gaze to Bianca's plunging neckline. "You look expensive, darling. That's all that matters." Aurora placed the menus down gently and retreated. Her hands were trembling slightly. It wasn't the rudeness. She was used to that. It was the specific energy radiating from Julian Thorne. It was the energy of a man who believed the world was something he could chew up and spit out. Back at the service station, Henri was hovering. "Well?" "Sparkling water. He wants the sommelier," Aurora reported. "Go, quickly. Do not keep Thorne waiting," Henri snapped. As Aurora fetched the water, she watched Table 4 from across the room. They leaned in close. The atmosphere around them was conspiratorial. Julian was clearly stressed. Despite his bravado, he kept tapping his fingers on the white tablecloth. Aurora returned with the silver tray, placing the chilled bottle and 2 crystal glasses on the table. She poured with practiced precision, one hand behind her back. As she poured, Julian leaned forward and spoke to Bianca, but he didn't speak in English. He switched to French, rapid, colloquial, and laced with venom. He assumed, quite naturally, that the American waitress in the generic uniform would not understand a word of fluent, native-speed Parisian French. "Regarde ses mains," Julian said in French, gesturing subtly toward Aurora's hand as she poured the water. "Rouges et gercées. C'est dégoûtant. On dirait qu'elle a passé la journée à récurer les toilettes." Translation: "Look at her hands. Red and chapped. It's disgusting. Looks like she spent the day scrubbing toilets." Aurora froze for a nanosecond. The liquid in the bottle wavered, threatening to spill, but she corrected it instantly. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Bianca giggled, taking a sip of her water. She replied in French, her accent heavy and Americanized, but understandable. "Ne sois pas méchant, chérie. C'est probablement tout ce qu'elle peut faire. Elle a ce regard vide, comme une vache qui regarde un train passer." Translation: "Don't be mean, darling. It's probably all she can do. She has that look empty, like a cow watching a train go by." Aurora finished pouring. She set the bottle down. She felt a flush of heat rising up her neck, but she didn't blink. She didn't react. This was the test. If she reacted, she lost her job. If she lost her job, her mother's care facility payments would bounce. "Will there be anything else to start?" Aurora asked in English, her voice perfectly calm, though inside a fire was beginning to kindle. "Just bring the bread," Julian said in English, waving her away again like a stray dog. "And make sure it's warm." As Aurora turned to leave, she heard Julian switch back to French, his voice dropping an octave. "Détends-toi, Bianca. Après ce soir, je pourrais acheter ce restaurant et virer tout le monde juste pour le plaisir. L'affaire Blackwood est presque bouclée." Translation. Relax, Bianca. After tonight, I could buy this restaurant and fire everyone just for fun. The Blackwood deal is almost done. Aurora walked toward the kitchen, her mind racing. The Blackwood deal? She knew that name. Blackwood Systems was a cybersecurity firm that was supposedly strictly ethical. A merger with Thorn Dynamics, a company known for data mining and privacy violations, would be catastrophic for the industry. But more importantly, it was supposed to be impossible. Blackwood had publicly stated they would never sell to Thorn. She pushed through the swinging kitchen doors, the noise of clattering pans and shouting chefs washing over her. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a spy in the enemy camp, and the enemy had just handed her the key to the castle, thinking she was too stupid to use it. The kitchen of l'Orangerie was a chaotic ballet. Chef Marco was screaming about the scallop risotto, while sous chefs scrambled like terrified ants. Aurora grabbed the bread basket, sourdough, baked fresh 20 minutes ago, and arranged the artisanal butter. "Table 4 demands perfection," Henri reminded her as he passed by, holding a bottle of vintage Bordeaux worth more than Aurora's car. "Don't walk too fast. Don't walk too slow." "I know the drill, Henry," Aurora murmured. She took a deep breath, composing herself. The insult about her hands still stung. She looked down at them. They were red. The industrial detergent used in the restaurant degraded her skin, and she couldn't afford the high-end creams she used to use in Paris. But these hands had also written thesis papers on geopolitical economics. These hands had played the cello in college. These hands were strong. She walked back out onto the floor. The ambient jazz music covered the sound of her approach. As she neared table 4, she slowed her pace, intentionally making herself small, unnoticeable. She placed the bread on the table. Julian and Bianca were deep in conversation. They didn't even acknowledge the arrival of the food. They were still speaking French, and the topic had shifted from mocking the staff to something much darker. "Tu es sûr que le conseil d'administration ne va rien voir?" Bianca asked, looking nervous. She picked at the tablecloth. Translation. "Are you sure the board of directors won't see anything?" Julian laughed, tearing off a piece of bread violently. "Ces idiots, ils ne verraient pas un incendie s'ils étaient assis dedans. J'ai falsifié les rapports de durabilité, Bianca. Les chiffres sont gonflés de 40%. Translation. "Those idiots, they wouldn't see a fire if they were sitting in it. I faked the sustainability reports, Bianca. The numbers are inflated by 40%. Aurora felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Fraud. He was admitting to massive corporate fraud right in front of her. Falsifying sustainability reports was a federal offense, especially for a company the size of Thorn Dynamics. If this merger with Blackwood went through based on fake numbers, thousands of investors would lose their money when the truth came out. She filled their water glasses again, moving with agonizing slowness, desperate to hear more. "Et qu'est-ce qui arrive si cette petite journaliste, comment elle s'appelle? Sarah Jenkins, continue de fouiner?" Bianca asked. Translation. "And what happens if that little journalist, what's her name, Sarah Jenkins, keeps snooping?" Julian's face darkened. He took a long sip of the Bordeaux the sommelier had just poured. "Ne t'inquiète pas pour Jenkins. J'ai engagé quelqu'un pour lui faire peur. Elle va recevoir une visite ce soir. Une brique à travers la fenêtre, ça fait taire beaucoup de questions." Translation. Don't worry about Jenkins. I hired someone to scare her. She's getting a visit tonight. A brick through the window shuts down a lot of questions." Aurora's hand shook, and the pitcher of water clinked against the glass. A tiny drop of water splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. It was a microscopic error, a nothing. But to Julian Thorne, it was a declaration of war. He slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "Jesus Christ!" he shouted in English, causing heads at nearby tables to turn. "Can you not do the one simple thing you are paid to do?" Aurora recoiled, clutching the pitcher. "I am so sorry, sir. Let me get a napkin." "I don't want a napkin," Julian sneered. He looked at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. "I want competent service. Look at this." He pointed to the dime-sized water spot. "You've ruined the ambience. You're clumsy." Bianca chimed in, switching back to English to join the fun. "Honestly, it's embarrassing. Are you drunk or are you just stupid?" "I apologize," Aurora said, lowering her head. "I will change the tablecloth immediately." "No," Julian commanded. "Leave it. I want you to look at it and remember how incompetent you are while you serve us." He turned to Bianca and switched back to French, his voice dripping with superiority. "C'est pathétique. Aux États-Unis, ils laissent n'importe qui travailler dans le luxe. En France, elle ne serait même pas autorisée à laver la vaisselle." Translation: It's pathetic. In the US, they let anyone work in luxury. In France, she wouldn't even be allowed to wash dishes. Bianca laughed, a cruel tinkling sound. "Regarde sa robe. Elle est trop grande. Elle a l'air d'un enfant qui joue à se déguiser. Elle ne comprend rien à la sophistication." Translation: Look at her dress. It's too big. She looks like a child playing dress-up. She understands nothing about sophistication. Aurora stood there, taking it. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to throw the pitcher of ice water into Julian's arrogant face. She wanted to tell him that her dress was too big because she had lost 15 pounds from stress and skipping meals to pay for her mother's medication. She wanted to tell him that she understood sophistication better than he did, because true sophistication was treating people with dignity. But she couldn't. Not yet. She had to be smart. She had to be the spy. "I will bring your appetizers shortly," Aurora said, her voice devoid of emotion. She turned and walked away, feeling their eyes boring into her back. As she reached the safety of the server's station, she leaned against the counter, her breathing shallow. Henry appeared beside her. "He's angry, I can see it. What did you do?" "I spilled a drop of water," Aurora whispered. "A drop?" Henry rolled his eyes. "These people, they look for reasons to be miserable. Just survive the night, Aurora. The tip is mandatory, 20% on large bills. Think of the money." "It's not about the money anymore, Henri," Aurora said, staring at the kitchen doors. Her eyes had hardened. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. "What do you mean?" Henry asked, frowning. Aurora didn't answer. She was thinking about Sarah Jenkins. She knew that name. Sarah was an investigative reporter for the New York Chronicle. If Julian had actually sent someone to threaten a reporter, that was criminal. That was dangerous. Aurora pulled a small notepad from her apron pocket. Usually, she used it to write down orders. Now she flipped to a fresh page. She wrote down, "Sustainability reports inflated 40%. Blackwood deal based on fraud. Sarah Jenkins. Threat tonight." She tore the page out and shoved it deep into her pocket. She picked up the tray with their appetizers, escargot for him, beef carpaccio for her. She was going back into the lion's den. But the lions didn't know that the mouse spoke their language, and the mouse was done being afraid. As she approached the table, Julian was on his phone again, looking agitated. Dis à l'équipe juridique de déchiqueter les documents de 2023, tout ce qui concerne le projet Etelgard. Ce soir. Pas demain. Ce soir. Translation. Tell the legal team to shred the 2023 documents, everything related to Project Ethelgard. Tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight. Project Ethelgard. Aurora's mind raced. That was the rumor, the illegal data harvesting project that supposedly didn't exist. She placed the escargot in front of Julian. Finally, he grunted. Aurora looked him dead in the eye. For a second, just a second, she let the mask slip. She let him see the intelligence burning behind her gaze. Julian paused, fork halfway to his mouth. He frowned, unsettled. He felt something, a shift in the air, but he couldn't place it. He dismissed it as his own paranoia. The night was just beginning, and Aurora Vance was about to serve a main course they would never forget. The kitchen was a pressure cooker of steam and shouting, but for Aurora, the real heat was coming from the secret burning a hole in her apron pocket. The note. Sustainability reports inflated, shredding documents tonight. She had 10 minutes before the main courses, lobster thermidor for him, truffle risotto for her, were ready to be run. She needed to act. If Julian's threats against the journalist, Sarah Jenkins, were real, a woman's life was in danger. Aurora wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the only line of defense. "Henry, I need a bathroom break. 2 minutes," Aurora said, feigning a grimace. "Stomach cramp." Henry sighed, checking his watch. 2 minutes, Aurora. If the lobster sits under the heat lamp for 1 second too long, it gets rubbery. And if it gets rubbery, Mr. Thorne will have my head on a platter. "I'll be back," she promised. She rushed to the employee locker room in the basement. It smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. Her hands shook as she unlocked her locker and grabbed her cheap smartphone. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She quickly searched for Sarah Jenkins' New York Chronicle. There was a public tip line, but that would be too slow. She found a Twitter handle. She found a professional email. She decided on the email, hoping Sarah had push notifications on. Subject: Urgent threat. Thorne Dynamics body. Ms. Jenkins, you are in immediate danger. Julian Thorne is at l'Orangerie restaurant right now. I have overheard him ordering an attack on your home tonight to stop your investigation. He also admitted to inflating sustainability reports by 40% and is shredding documents regarding Project Ethelgard tonight. This is not a prank. Get to safety. Police have been notified. She hit send. Then, with trembling fingers, she dialed the non-emergency line for the NYPD. She reported an anonymous tip about a break-in planned at the journalist's address. It was all she could do. She shoved the phone back into the locker and splashed cold water on her face. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror. Her eyes were hard. She remembered her father, a man of honor who lost everything because he played by the rules while men like Julian Thorne cheated. Not tonight, she thought. Tonight, the cheater pays. She ran back upstairs just as Chef Marco slammed the plates onto the pass. "Service! Table 4! Aurora smoothed her apron, composed her face into a mask of servitude, and lifted the heavy silver tray. When she arrived at the table, the atmosphere had shifted. They were on their 3rd glass of wine. Bianca's cheeks were flushed, and Julian's tie was loosened slightly. He looked sloppy, the alcohol stripping away the veneer of the sophisticated CEO and revealing the thug underneath. Aurora placed the lobster down. "Merci," Julian mocked, his pronunciation exaggerated and incorrect. He looked at Bianca and laughed. "Regarde ça. Elle essaie de ne pas faire tomber l'assiette. C'est mignon, non? Comme un chien qui apprend un tour." Translation: Watch this. She's trying not to drop the plate. It's cute, isn't it? Like a dog learning a trick. Aurora didn't flinch. She placed the risotto in front of Bianca. Bianca looked at the dish and wrinkled her nose. I said no parsley. Aurora looked. There was a tiny garnish of parsley on the rim. I apologize, Miss St. Clair. I can remove that for you instantly. No, Bianca said, her voice petulant. She picked up her fork and flicked the parsley off the plate. It landed on the pristine white tablecloth, leaving a small green smear of oil. Then, looking Aurora dead in the eye, she flicked a glob of risotto onto the floor. It was a deliberate act of humiliation, a power play. Oops, Bianca giggled. I'm so clumsy. You should clean that up before someone slips. Julian watched, amused. He took a bite of lobster, savouring the show. Fais-la s'agenouiller, Bianca. C'est sa place. Translation, make her kneel, Bianca. That is her place. Aurora stood frozen. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders. The restaurant was full. People were watching. Well, Bianca snapped, are you going to clean it, or do I need to call your little manager again? Aurora slowly reached into her apron for a crummer and a napkin. She lowered herself. She bent her knees. She knelt on the carpet of l'orangerie, at the feet of a woman who had never worked a day in her life. As Aurora scrubbed the spot, her head bowed. Julian leaned down. He spoke in French, low and venomous, intended only for Bianca, but right next to Aurora's ear. Tu sais ce qui est drôle? Demain, je transfère les fonds des pensions de retraite vers les comptes aux îles Caïmans. Ces ouvriers ne verront jamais un centime. Et je serai sur mon yacht. Translation. You know what's funny? Tomorrow, I'm transferring the pension funds to the Cayman Islands accounts. Those workers will never see a cent, and I'll be on my yacht. Aurora stopped scrubbing. Her hand froze on the carpet. Pension funds. He was stealing the retirement money of his employees, thousands of families. It was evil, pure, distilled greed. She finished cleaning the spot. She stood up slowly. Her knees cracked. Is that satisfactory, Miss St. Clair? Aurora asked, her voice dangerously quiet. It'll do. Bianca waved her hand. Now get out of my sight. You're ruining my appetite. Aurora walked away. But this time she didn't feel small. She felt dangerous. She had the name of the project. She had the threat. And now she had the financial crime. She walked past Henri. You okay? Henri asked, seeing the pale rage in her face. I'm fine, Henri, Aurora said. Just preparing for the dessert. The meal dragged on. For Julian and Bianca, it was a night of celebration. For Aurora, it was a covert operation. Every time she refilled their water or cleared a plate, she gathered more intelligence. They were reckless, drunk on their own perceived invincibility, believing their French was a cryptographic code that no mere servant could crack. They discussed bribing a zoning commissioner for a new headquarters. They laughed about a former assistant Julian had fired for getting pregnant. They were a catalogue of human awfulness. Then came the wine incident. Julian had ordered a bottle of Chateau Petrus, 1998. It was one of the most expensive bottles on the menu, priced at 4,500. The sommelier, a nervous young man named David, presented the bottle with reverence. He uncorked it, poured a taste for Julian, and stepped back. Julian swirled the dark red liquid, sniffed it, and took a sip. He made a show of rolling it around his mouth. Then he spat it back into the glass. Disgusting, Julian announced loud enough for the next table to hear. It's corked. Take it away. David turned pale. Sir, I inspected the cork myself. The provenance is impeccable. Perhaps if you let it breathe. Are you arguing with me? Julian's voice rose. I said it's corked. It tastes like wet cardboard and vinegar. Bring me another one, and take this swill off my bill." David looked like he was about to cry. A rejected bottle of that price was a disaster for the restaurant's inventory. He took the bottle and retreated. Aurora watched this from the station. She knew wine. Her father had a cellar. She knew that the likelihood of a Petrus of that vintage being corked was low, and even if it was, Julian's reaction was theatrical. As David walked away, Julian leaned over to Bianca, snickering. "Le vin était parfait," Julian whispered in French, grinning like a schoolboy who just pulled a fire alarm. "Je voulais juste voir le petit transpirer. Et je ne paie pas pour la première bouteille si je la renvoie. C'est une tactique de pouvoir, chérie." Translation: "The wine was perfect. I just wanted to see the little guy sweat. And I don't pay for the first bottle if I send it back. It's a power tactic, darling." Bianca laughed, touching his arm. "Tu es diabolique, Julian. J'adore ça." Translation: "You are diabolical, Julian. I love it." Aurora felt a snap inside her chest. It was the sound of her patience breaking. He was hurting David, a sweet kid who was studying to be a master sommelier, just for fun, just to save a few $1,000s he didn't even need. She checked her pocket. Her phone buzzed silently against her hip. She couldn't check it on the floor, but the vibration gave her hope. Maybe Sarah Jenkins had replied. Maybe the police were moving. She walked over to clear the main course plates. The table was a mess of breadcrumbs and wine stains. "Did you enjoy the meal?" Aurora asked. "The lobster was tough," Julian lied. "But I suppose in a dump like this, one lowers one's expectations." "I will inform the chef," Aurora said robotically. "You do that," Julian said. He looked at her, his eyes glassy. "Tell me, what do you aspire to be? Surely you don't dream of wiping tables for the rest of your sad little life." It was a direct question, a trap. Aurora met his gaze. "I aspire to see justice, sir." Julian blinked. The answer threw him off. "Justice? What is that supposed to mean? You want to be a cop?" He laughed. "You don't have the spine for it." "Justice comes in many forms," Aurora said, her voice steady. "Sometimes it's a judge. Sometimes it's a karmic balance." "Karma is for poor people who can't afford lawyers," Julian sneered. He turned to Bianca. "Elle est bizarre. On dirait qu'elle prépare un attentat." Translation: "She's weird. Looks like she's planning an attack." Bianca looked at Aurora with disdain. "Just bring the dessert menu. And coffee. Espresso. Don't burn it." Aurora bowed slightly. "As you wish." She retreated to the kitchen. As she pushed through the doors, she saw Henri holding the rejected bottle of Petrus. He looked devastated. "He says it's corked, Aurora," Henri said, rubbing his temples. "The owner is going to kill me." "It's not corked, Henri," Aurora said firmly. He admitted it to his girlfriend. He said it was perfect. He just wanted to humiliate David and get a free bottle. Henri looked at her, shocked. "How do you know? You don't speak French." Aurora paused. She looked at Henri, then at David, who was slumped in the corner. She looked at the busy kitchen, the sweat on the chef's brows, the honest work being done by honest people. "Trust me, Henri," Aurora said. "I know." She pulled out her phone. One new email. From Sarah Jenkins. Subject: Urgent threat. Message: "Who is this? I'm at a safe house. Police just intercepted a man with a brick and a flash drive outside my apartment. They are looking for a connection to Thorne. If you have proof of the fraud, I need it. I can get a warrant within the hour if the evidence is solid." Aurora's heart soared. They caught the guy. The brick. The threat was real, and she had stopped it. But now she needed the final nail in the coffin. She needed Julian to admit to the fraud on record, or she needed to guide the police to the shredding party. She looked at Henry. Henri, give me the dessert menu, and give me the tablet we use for the POS system. Why? Because, Aurora said, a small, terrifying smile playing on her lips. Mr. Thorne is about to get his check, but the bill isn't going to be in dollars. She walked back out to the floor. The climax was approaching. Julian was loud, laughing, tapping his spoon against the table. He thought he owned the world. Aurora approached the table, not as a servant, but as an executioner. She held the dessert menu in one hand. Dessert? She asked. Just the bill, Julian said, yawning. I'm bored. Let's go to the club, Bianca. Certainly, sir, Aurora said. I have the bill right here. She didn't move to get the check folder. She just stood there. Well, Julian snapped. Go get it. Actually, Aurora said, and for the first time that night, she dropped the customer service voice. Her tone was crisp, authoritative, and perfectly modulated. Before I bring the bill, there is a small matter of the conversation you've been having for the last 2 hours. Julian frowned. Excuse me? Aurora took a breath. It was time to drop the bomb. She looked him dead in the eye and spoke, but she didn't speak in English. Monsieur Thorne, avant de partir, voudriez-vous aussi que j'inclue le prix de votre intégrité sur l'addition? Ou avez-vous déjà tout vendu pour financer votre fraude aux îles Caïmans? Translation. Mr. Thorne, before you leave, would you also like me to include the price of your integrity on the bill? Or have you already sold it all to finance your fraud in the Cayman Islands? The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. Julian's face went slack. The color drained from his skin so fast he looked like a corpse. Bianca dropped her fork. It clattered against the china, a harsh, metallic ring that signaled the end of the game. The invisible woman had just spoken, and she had spoken perfectly. The air in l'orangerie seemed to crystallize. The background hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, the jazz music, it all faded into a dull roar in Julian Thorne's ears. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heart, which was currently trying to escape his chest. He stared at Aurora. The woman he had dismissed as furniture, as a cow, as a peasant, was standing over him with the posture of a queen. Her French had been flawless, not high school French, native French, the kind you learn by living in the 7th arrondissement of Paris. Bianca was the first to speak, her voice trembling. What? What did she say? Bianca's French was good enough to mock people, but Aurora's rapid-fire delivery had stunned her. Julian ignored his girlfriend. He stood up slowly, his napkin sliding off his lap onto the floor. His face was a rictus of panic masked by aggression. "Who are you?" he hissed, his voice low. "Who sent you? Is it Blackwood? Are you a corporate spy?" Aurora didn't back down. She took a step closer to the table. "I am nobody, Mr. Thorne. I am, as you so eloquently put it, the woman with the red, chapped hands. I am the one who looks like she scrubs toilets." She held up her hands, displaying them. They were steady. "These hands," she continued, switching back to English so the surrounding tables, who were now watching with rapt attention, could understand. "These hands have been refilling your water while you confess to federal crimes. These hands have been serving your bread while you plotted to destroy a journalist's life. And these hands have been recording the timestamp of every single admission you made tonight." Julian's eyes darted around the room. He saw the diners watching. He saw Henri, the maitre d', standing by the station with his mouth open. "You're lying," Julian scoffed, though sweat was beginning to bead on his forehead. "You're a waitress. No one will believe a word you say. It's your word against mine." "Is it?" Aurora smiled. a cold, sharp expression. You mentioned the sustainability reports are inflated by 40%. You mentioned transferring pension funds to the Cayman Islands tomorrow. You laughed about shredding the Project Ethelgard documents tonight. Julian flinched as if he'd been slapped. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a money clip. It was thick with cash, $100 bills. "Okay," he said, his voice taking on a desperate, wheedling tone. "Okay, smart girl. You speak French. Bravo. You caught me talking shop. How much?" "Excuse me?" Aurora asked. "How much do you want?" He peeled off a stack of bills. "There's $2,000 here. Take it. Walk away. Forget you heard anything." Aurora laughed. It was a genuine laugh, filled with disbelief. $2,000? You're trying to buy my integrity for the price of a handbag? 5,000, Julian snapped, pulling out a checkbook. "I'll write you a check right now. 10,000. Think about it. That's 6 months of wages for someone like you. You can fix your situation. You can buy some cream for those hands." Bianca chimed in, looking terrified. "Just take the money. He can ruin you." Aurora looked at the cash, then back at Julian. The disgust she felt was overwhelming. "You think everyone is for sale because you sold your soul years ago, Mr. Thorne. But you can't buy this. You can't buy your way out of the fact that you ordered a physical assault on Sarah Jenkins." Julian went pale. I emailed her," Aurora interrupted. 40 minutes ago, when I went to the bathroom, I warned her." And she replied, "The police intercepted your hired thug outside her apartment. He had a brick and a flash drive. He's in custody, Julian. And I'm guessing he's cutting a deal right now to give up the man who hired him." Julian dropped the money clip. It hit the table with a heavy thud. You little bitch," he snarled, losing all composure. He lunged forward, grabbing Aurora's wrist. "You ruined everything. Do you know who I am?" "Let go of her," Henry shouted, rushing forward. 2 busboys dropped their trays and ran toward the table, but Aurora didn't pull away. She looked at Julian's hand, gripping her wrist, then up at his eyes. "Lâche-moi!" she commanded in French, her voice vibrating with authority. "Ou je te jure que je te brise le doigt." Translation: "Let go of me, or I swear I will break your finger." Julian froze. The ferocity in her eyes was something he had never seen in a service worker. It was the look of someone who had nothing left to lose. He let go, stumbling back. "You're dead," he whispered. "You'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure you starve." "I might starve," Aurora said, smoothing her uniform. "But at least I won't be in a federal prison cell." She turned to the stunned dining room. "I apologize for the disturbance, ladies and gentlemen, but I refuse to serve a man who steals from his employees' pension funds." A hush fell over the room. Then, slowly, a man at table 7, an elderly gentleman who looked like he knew a thing or two about business, started to clap. Then a woman at table 2. Soon, half the restaurant was applauding, but the applause was cut short by the sound of sirens. The wail of sirens grew louder, screeching to a halt right outside the black doors of l'Orangerie. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows, painting the elegant dining room in harsh, chaotic colors. Julian looked at the door, then at the kitchen exit. He was trapped. "Bianca, we need to leave," he said, grabbing her arm. "Back door, now!" Bianca yanked her arm away. She stood up, grabbing her clutch. "We?" "There is no we, Julian. I'm not going to jail for you." "Bianca! I didn't know anything," Bianca screamed, looking around at the other diners, playing the victim. "He lied to me. I thought he was a legitimate businessman." "You literally laughed about the fraud 10 minutes ago," Aurora pointed out dryly. The restaurant doors burst open. It wasn't just the NYPD. It was men in windbreakers with FBI printed in yellow on the back. Leading them was a detective in a cheap suit, looking tired but satisfied. "Julian Thorne?" the detective called out. Julian straightened his jacket, trying to summon the last shreds of his CEO persona. "This is harassment. I am eating dinner. I will call my lawyer and have your badges." "You can call your lawyer from Central Booking," the detective said, walking over. "Julian Thorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit assault, wire fraud, and securities fraud." "On what evidence?" Julian shouted. "Because a waitress says so?" The detective smirked. "No. Because the man you paid $5,000 to throw a brick through Sarah Jenkins's window just gave us your text messages. And because we just executed a search warrant at your office and found your team shredding documents. Turns out, shredders don't work as fast as the FBI." He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Turn around." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest sound Aurora had ever heard. It was better than any symphony. Julian was marched out of the restaurant, his head hung low, the arrogant shark reduced to a common criminal. As he passed Aurora, he stopped. He looked at her with pure hatred. "What is your name?" he spat. "I want to know the name of the girl who killed me." Aurora looked him in the eye. "My name is Aurora Vance, and I didn't kill you, Julian. Your own arrogance did. I just served the check." He was shoved forward by the officers. Bianca tried to slink away in the confusion, but a female officer blocked her path. "Ms. St. Clair, we have some questions for you regarding your knowledge of Mr. Thorne's activities." I have nothing to say," Bianca stammered. "You can say it at the station," the officer said, guiding her out. The restaurant was in chaos. The owner, Mr. Moretti, had arrived from his office upstairs. He looked at the scene, the police, the arrested billionaire, the stunned diners. Then he looked at Aurora. He walked over to her. Henry stood nervously beside him. "Aurora," Mr. Moretti said, his voice grave. "I'm sorry, Mr. Moretti," Aurora said, untying her apron. "I know I caused a scene. I'll pack my things." "Pack your things?" Moretti frowned. "Why?" "Because I disrupted service. I spoke back to a VIP." Moretti looked at the door where Julian had just been dragged out. Then he looked at the guests who were still murmuring in support of Aurora. "You stopped a criminal," Moretti said, "and you saved my restaurant from being associated with a massive fraud scandal. If news got out that he made deals here and we did nothing, that would be the end of us." He put a hand on her shoulder. "You're not fired, Aurora. Take the week off. Paid. Get some rest. You look like you've been through a war." Aurora felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, sir. But I think I'm done with serving tables." "Oh?" Moretti asked. "I think it's time I went back to what I'm actually good at," she said, looking at her hands. They were still red, still chapped, but they weren't trembling anymore. She walked to the locker room, changed into her street clothes, jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, and walked out the back door into the rainy New York night. She didn't have a job anymore. She didn't have savings, but as she breathed in the cold air, she felt lighter than she had in years. 6 months later, the fall of Julian Thorne was not a graceful stumble. It was a cataclysmic crash that shook the foundations of the New York financial world. The trial was the most televised event of the season. Aurora Vance, the woman who had once been invisible to him, sat in the gallery, watching the man who had mocked her poverty be stripped of his own. The evidence she had provided, the timestamps, the specific phrases, the correlation with the shredded documents recovered by the FBI, was irrefutable. Julian looked smaller in the courtroom, stripped of his bespoke suits and his arrogance. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on 12 counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy, Julian didn't look at the jury. He looked for Aurora, but she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the future. Bianca St. Clair fared no better. Desperate to save her own skin, she had turned state's witness, testifying against Julian in exchange for a lighter sentence. But the court of public opinion was less forgiving. She was branded a pariah, dropped by every agency and brand she had ever worked with. The last the tabloids saw of her, she was crying in a messy bun outside a courthouse, a far cry from the polished, cruel socialite who had flicked risotto onto a carpet. But for Aurora, the viral fame that followed was overwhelming. She became known as the waitress who took down a titan. Her face was on the cover of the New York Post, not as a victim, but as a hero of the working class. Strangers stopped her in the street to shake her hand. However, the most important phone call didn't come from a talk show host. It came from Arthur Sterling, the CEO of Blackwood Systems, the very company Julian had tried to destroy. "Ms. Vance," Sterling had said, his voice grave but kind, "you saved my company from a merger that would have destroyed our reputation. You have a degree from the Sorbonne, correct?" "I do," Aurora had replied, sitting in the small, cramped apartment she was about to leave forever. "Then why were you serving tables?" "Because life happens, Mr. Sterling, and I did what I had to do to survive." "Well," Sterling said, "you don't need to survive anymore. I want you to thrive. I need someone with your integrity, your language skills, and your ability to stay cool under pressure. I'm offering you the position of Director of International Compliance. Name your salary." 6 months later, Aurora Vance stood in her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Blackwood building. The view was breathtaking, a panorama of Manhattan that looked like a kingdom made of glass and steel. But unlike Julian, Aurora didn't look down on the city with contempt. She looked at it with gratitude. She looked down at her hands. They were no longer red and chapped from industrial dish soap. They were soft, manicured, and resting on a leather-bound report. But she knew the strength was still there. The grit was still there. The salary from her new position had changed everything. The first check she received went entirely to the Oakwood Care Facility in upstate New York. She had moved her mother there immediately. A private room with a view of the garden, round-the-clock specialists, and dignity. Last weekend, her mother had squeezed her hand and smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years. "You look rested, Aurora," she had said. "You look like yourself again." That moment was worth more than all of Julian Thorne's billions. There was a knock on the office door, snapping Aurora out of her reverie. "Ready, boss?" It was Sarah Jenkins, the journalist. The two had formed an unbreakable bond in the fire of the scandal. Sarah had won a Pulitzer for the story. Aurora had won her life back. "I'm ready," Aurora smiled, grabbing her trench coat. They took the elevator down and walked a few blocks to a familiar black door with gold inlay. L'Orangerie. Walking in was a surreal experience. The smell of saffron and truffle oil was the same, but the feeling was entirely different. This time, Aurora wasn't entering through the service door. She was walking in as a VIP. Henri, the maître d', froze when he saw her. Then his waxed mustache twitched, and his face broke into a genuine, beaming grin. He rushed over, bypassing the reservation podium. "Aurora!" Henri exclaimed, grasping her hands warmly. "Or should I say, Madame Director?" "Aurora is fine, Henri," she laughed. "It's so good to see you. The staff, we miss you," Henri whispered, leaning in. "But we are so proud. David passed his sommelier exam, by the way. He wanted you to know." "That's wonderful," Aurora said, her heart swelling. Henri led them to table 4, the very same table where Julian had sat that fateful night. It felt poetic, a reclaiming of space. As they settled in, a young waitress approached. She looked nervous, her apron slightly askew, a smudge of flour on her cheek. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't hide. She reminded Aurora so much of herself that it made her chest ache. The young waitress's hands trembled slightly as she poured the water. "Good evening. Welcome to l'Orangerie. My name is Maya." Sarah opened her menu, but Aurora didn't look at the food. She looked at Maya. She saw the exhaustion, the fear of making a mistake, the invisible weight she was carrying. Aurora smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Hello, Maya," Aurora said softly. "Take your time. We are in no rush." Maya blinked, surprised by the kindness in a room usually filled with impatience. She relaxed, her shoulders dropping an inch. "Thank you, Mum." "And Maya," Aurora added, as the girl turned to leave. "Make sure you keep that chin up. You never know where you might be sitting 6 months from now." As the waitress walked away with a newfound bounce in her step, Sarah raised her wine glass. "To justice," Sarah said. Aurora clinked her glass against Sarah's. "To being seen," she corrected. They drank, and for the first time in a long time, the wine tasted perfect. Julian Thorne was in a cell, rotting with his secrets. Bianca was fading into obscurity, but Aurora Vance was right here, sitting at the head of the table, proving that while money can scream, true class whispers, and it speaks fluent French. What a satisfying ending. Julian and Bianca thought their wealth made them untouchable. They thought they could speak in code and treat people like garbage without consequences. But they forgot the golden rule. Never underestimate the person who serves you. Aurora proved that dignity and intelligence are worth far more than a designer suit or a Cayman Islands bank account. She didn't just serve them dinner. She served them justice. This story is a powerful reminder that everyone has a story we don't know about. The quietest person in the room might be the smartest, and kindness costs nothing, but rudeness can cost you everything. What would you have done if you were in Aurora's shoes? Would you have taken the money, or would you have exposed him? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good comeback, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories every week. Thanks for watching.